Bienvenidos y bienvenidas a esta nueva conversación de los Encuentros del Futuro que nos permiten conocer las visiones de distintos especialistas y referentes de nivel mundial en múltiples disciplinas, con interesantes reflexiones con motivo de los Congresos del Futuro. En esta oportunidad, el periodista Daniel Matamala intentará obtener del reconocido Richard Dawkins algunas respuestas y su particular lectura sobre el ateísmo, las religiones y la fe, algunas bien aclaratorias, porque tendemos a confundir al ateo, aquel que no cree en la existencia de dioses, con el agnóstico, aquel que no tiene conocimiento de la existencia de dioses. Todo esto y más en este nuevo capítulo de Encuentros del Futuro.
Bienvenidos a Encuentros del Futuro. Hoy tenemos la segunda de nuestras entrevistas con uno de los científicos e intelectuales más relevantes del mundo de la actualidad, Richard Dawkins. Mr. Dawkins, thank you for being here with us. Let's talk about atheism. You said that faith is one of the world's great evils. Why?
Well, faith encourages people to do things without reason. So usually you should base your decisions upon evidence, you should base your beliefs upon evidence, and your decision should be based upon evidence to and prediction of likely outcomes. Faith says you must believe this, whether you've got any evidence for it or not. Indeed, you are appraised, you're encouraged to believe things for which there is no evidence. When doubting Thomas, St. Thomas was worried, didn't believe that Jesus had risen from the dead, and he wanted to actually touch him. And Jesus said, Thomas, because thou hast seen, thou believes. And then he said, more virtuous are those who believe without seeing. That's a terrible motto. St. Thomas should be regarded as the patron saint of scientists. You must only believe what there is evidence for. And faith can be truly pernicious if the beliefs that you hold without evidence lead you to do fanatical, dangerous things like killing people, bombing people, suicide bombs, and so on. And we see this in the world today. Reported in the news all the time because of faith.
Don't you think that there is a space in human experience for kind of experience things that are not related with evidence, with rationality?
Because it's always based on evidence. I mean, it may be very subtle evidence. And the examples one often hears about is, how do you know your wife loves you? Well, you have evidence. The evidence may not be scientifically experimental evidence or something like that. It's nothing like, but you have evidence from little catches in the voice, little looks in the eye, little touches. Everything in your everyday experience makes you know your wife loves you, your husband loves you, and this is evidence. It's not something other than evidence. By something other than evidence, I mean something supernatural, and that's what real faith, religious faith, is. It's belief in something there's absolutely no evidence for whatsoever.
You propose a militant atheism. It's not sufficient to say, okay, some people have faith, some haven't, everybody is entitled to its own belief, and end of the story?
Well, everybody is entitled to their own beliefs, you can say that, but they're not entitled to their own facts. Facts are independent of what people want to believe. And this tolerant attitude that everybody should believe what they want becomes dangerous when they actually leads to suicide bombing and that kind of thing, which happens not all the time, but it happens sufficiently often. Only the extreme fanatics actually do it. But the non-extreme ones, who are not fanatical, they've all been brought up to believe that faith is a virtue. The other thing I feel is that feeding children with nonsense is depriving them of the opportunity to know how wonderful the true facts are. Scientific knowledge is a wonderful gift to give a child, and to feed a child with superstitious nonsense is, I think, a form of child abuse, really.
There are still some aspects of the universe that science can explain. At least until today, how everything starts, for example. Is there still a space there for other kind of explanation, or at least for rational agnosticism?
Well, we have to be agnostic about things that we don't have evidence for, of course. And as you say, there are things that we don't yet understand. Science doesn't yet understand the origin of the laws of physics, for example. But it's an extraordinarily illogical step to say, therefore, because science doesn't understand it, therefore religion does. I mean, nobody understands it. And if science can't explain something, you could bet your life religion can't explain it either.
Mm-hmm. You will said, as Robert Pirsig said, that, and I will quote him, when one person suffers from a delusion, it's called insanity. When many people suffer from a delusion, it's called religion?
Yes, it's a good point. There are people in lunatic asylums who think they're Napoleon and think they're God, and we call them lunatics. But as he said, when millions of people believe a similar delusion, it's called a religion, and they're supposed to respect it.
Mm-hmm. The vast majority of the world population is suffering a delusion?
It is, but decreasing actually. I mean, if you look in places where education is better, and especially where prosperity is better, where people are less deprived, Western Europe, Northern Europe, and actually even the United States of America, which is notoriously infested with religion, is coming down, and especially among younger people.
But if religion is just a kind of delusion, why has every known successful human society in history had a religion?
Well, it is, that's undoubtedly true, and it's partly a psychological question. Why is it psychologically reassuring to people to believe something supernatural? When you're faced with great mystery, and you're faced with the complexity of living things, and you know that human machines are designed by engineers, it's tempting to think, oh, well, the eye must be designed by a divine engineer. Also, there's things like fear of death, bereavement, hoping to meet your loved ones again after they've died, this kind of thing. So there's a great emotional satisfaction, comfort, consolation to be gained from religious belief. I think as an evolutionist, I've often said that I believe that religious belief and the widespread adoption of religious belief is a byproduct of something else in psychology. For example, a byproduct of the genuine biological value of things like obeying authority, especially in a child. It's important for children to survive. It's important for them to obey their parents and to believe what their parents tell them about the dangers that beset them, because there are such dangers. And that can carry over. If the child brain is pre-designed by the genes with the rule of thumb, believe whatever your parents tell you, then that's going to come into force even if what your parents tell you is nonsense. Because the child brain, by definition, has no way of distinguishing the good advice, like don't pick up snakes, from bad advice, or at least time-waste, silly advice, like you have to pray 5 times facing east.
Does not modern morality, Western civilization morality, came from the Bible?
No, I hope not. Anyway, if you read, anybody who says that and never read the Bible, especially the Old Testament, the Bible is an appalling manifesto for immorality.
But the New Testament has some very positive moral rules.
It has
of
the Sermon on the Mount. That's about it. Yes, blessed are the meek, etc. That's nice. But actually, the central message of the New Testament, which is really derives from St. Paul rather than from Jesus, the central message of the New Testament is that humans are all born in sin. They love this word sin. We're all born in sin. The only way to redeem yourself from sin is because of the blood of Jesus. Jesus had to die. God sent his own son in order to be executed and tortured for our sins. What a horrible idea. What a disgusting idea. And that's the central idea of Christianity, for which, as I said, Jesus himself is not to blame. Paul is to blame for that.
Probably Christian will say the central idea of the New Testament is love.
Well, you can say that. I mean, that's what Jesus would say. And as I say, I mean, Jesus was a good man. Paul was not a good man, and Christianity was founded by Paul, and we have the legacy of Paul.
If we agree that religion is a delusion, as you say, can we say also that maybe that delusion has some positive effects for societies?
I doubt it. I mean, it might have, but they would be rather incidental. I mean, we can do our moral philosophy without religion. We can work out. We can sit down together and work out what would be the best kind of society to live in. And we could disagree about it, but our criteria would be stateable criteria about welfare, about reducing suffering and that kind of thing. It would not be because a holy book says. Because the people who wrote the holy book, they wrote it 2,000 years ago, whatever it was, and they didn't know as much as we do. Why should we believe them?
Yeah, but I was thinking more about cohesion. Like, let me quote Durkheim: religions create cohesive groups that can function as organisms.
Well, that's a rather unevolutionary view, but yes, they can. And Yuval Harari has made this point. Others have made the point that religions provide a kind of social focus, which can be for good or can be bad. I mean, it can lead to this kind of social focus that shows itself in loyalty to your country in war, for example. Something like the First World War, which is, everybody agrees is the most ridiculous disaster, was fostered by social cohesion, the idea that we are British and we are best, or we are Germans and we are best. So social cohesion is a mixed blessing, and there are probably better ways of getting the good parts of it than religion.
But we have not any evidence of a society without religion that has last in the long term.
No, we haven't. The nearest approach would be in modern Scandinavia, I suppose, and these are countries where there is prosperity, where there's a great deal of social welfare, there's good education, there's good medical services. I mean, a world that imitated Scandinavia would be a pretty good world to live in.
Yeah. The question is that it could stand a long time, this kind of society. We still don't know.
As you say, we have to wait and see.
Vamos a hacer una pequeña pausa y volvemos conversando con Richard Dawkins en Encuentros del Futuro. Estamos de vuelta con Richard Dawkins. Mr. Dawkins, can't religion be in some moments or in some aspects a good thing for some societies?
I think it's had good effects. Mostly, I would think most of the good effects are artistic. I mean, superb works of art, paintings, music, great architecture. It's hard to think of anything else.
Let me give you a Chilean example. During Pinochet dictatorship, the Catholic Church was a sanctuary for many people. Many lives were saved because of the power of that institution. Pinochet can shut down the Congress, can shut down the independent media, but not the Catholic Church. So they have a positive role in this moment.
Yes, because they were a powerful institution, and historically the Catholic Church was important, and so Pinochet didn't dare, perhaps, to interfere, and people could take sanctuary. So this is a rather incidental byproduct, and this could have been any powerful institution. It happened to be a religious institution.
Now, today, the Catholic Church in Chile, not only in Chile, is having a very difficult time because of the cases of sexual abuse. What do you think about it?
Well, that's one reason why it's having a difficult time, and I would be glad to see the death of the Catholic Church. So I'm glad to see it declining in Ireland. I'm glad to see it declining in Chile, but for completely different reasons. I mean, because it's fostering untruths, which conflict with scientific truth. But yes, you're right, of course, that the Catholic Church is suffering gravely from the horrible practices of child abuse, which seem to prevail in it.
Should religious education be prohibited?
No, I think it's important that children should learn about religion, because it's impossible to understand history without understanding the religious motivation of so much that went on in history, in wars and other things. It's important to know the Bible because of literary references, so much, enormous, and I presume it's the same in Spanish, in English, huge numbers of figures of speech, similes, metaphors, come directly from the Bible. You would be illiterate if you didn't know the Bible, just as you're illiterate if you don't know great authors of the past like Shakespeare.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but I was thinking more about the education in a Catholic school, for example.
Pernicious and definitely should be stopped. I mean, teaching a child you belong to this religion, mm-hmm. you are a Catholic child, that is pernicious. That is actually child abuse. Mm-hmm. But teaching a child there is such a thing as Christianity. Some people believe this, some people believe that. There are Catholics, there are Protestants, there are Muslims, there are Jews. Mm-hmm. That would be important to teach children, but do not teach a child you are a Catholic child, you are a Protestant child. That's evil.
When you say that you would like to see the death of the Catholic Church, for many people, Catholic Church, or the churches in general, are also a way to tie with another individuals, are a social way to have significant relations with the neighbors.
Yes, I mean, there are surely better ways to do it than subscribing to a lot of cosmic falsehoods.
Mm-hmm. But don't you think that religion has at all a social benefit?
It probably does, but that's an incidental thing. And the important thing is it true? And it isn't true.
Mm-hmm. But a thing is not necessarily truth to have an effect in society.
Okay. If you care about that, good luck to you. I mean, I care about truth.
Uh-huh. But don't you care about how societies develop? How
yes, I think there are
other?
better ways to do it than to encourage belief in untruths. You can have social clubs, you can join political movements, you can go to concerts and lectures and theatres and drinking clubs. There are all sorts of ways of fostering social cohesion. Supporting football clubs, there are all sorts of things that unite people that don't go along with believing in falsehoods about the universe and life.
We can say that you want a post-religious world. Do you think it will be better?
Yes, I think it would be better, and I think it may be a long time coming.
Mm-hmm. And do you think, as a scientist now, that it will happen, that mankind will go to a post-religious world?
Well, as I say, I think eventually, but I think it'll take a long time. We need a lot more education. There's very good evidence that countries where there is a good social welfare provision and good education are the least religious countries in the world. Mm-hmm. And that shows itself too in the states within the United States of America. Mm-hmm. Religion tends to go with poverty and deprivation and lack of education. And so as those things we hope change, then religion will decline.
Do you think that also religion is relevant in violence?
Well, obviously, in places like Syria and the Middle East, yes.
Mm-hmm. But is not the violence about the holy and not necessarily about religion? I mean, the holy could be things different.
Yes,
different beliefs
well, that's exactly what we were talking about earlier of social cohesion. Mm-hmm. One of the consequences of religion is identifying yourself with a particular group. So, for example, in Northern Ireland, when Catholics and Protestants in Northern Ireland kill each other, they're not actually doing it because of a dispute over theology. They're doing it because this is our group, and that's their group. We are the orange, they are the green. Mm. I'm avenging the death of my grandfather, who was killed by a Catholic or by a Protestant. This is the downside, the negative side of the social cohesion that you were talking about. Mm. And that's the primary motivation, probably, of what I'm calling religious-inspired violence, but it's not inspired directly by theological disagreements. Mm-hmm. It's that people use labels to identify who the enemy is and who their own friend group is. And religion is a very powerful identification label because of the social cohesion effect, which you mentioned earlier.
Yeah, but the worst genocide in history were not acting in the name of religion. Stalin was acting
in
the name of the party.
Well, that depends what you call a religion. I mean, any fanatical belief which is not based upon evidence, if you define that as a religion, then Stalinism was a religion, Hitlerism was a religion. Admittedly, it wasn't a supernatural religion in that case.
Mm-hmm. There can be secular religions like that.
Sorry?
They could be secular religion like that, not connected with a
well, yes, you could call them secular religion, but it's a belief based upon something other than evidence.
Mm-hmm. Hitler believed that they have evidence that a race was superior to others.
It was false. I mean, yes, it was just fanatical false evidence.
And Stalin also believed that, like, the history was going to the party and the communism.
Yes. Well, these are dangerous beliefs because they're fanatical ideological beliefs which are not founded in good evidence.
And it's not dangerous to believe that science is always right, but because science is evolving, can be wrong and then be right again.
Science can be wrong, and science progresses actually by falsifying things. But science is the best method we have for discovering the truth, and if there were a better method, it would become a part of science.
Today, probably human rights are holy for many people in the world, or individual freedom or democracy. Are those holy principles not just as irrational as religion?
Well, that's interesting because, I mean, they are in a sense, because they come from a sort of fundamental belief in human rights, as opposed to, for example, the rights of non-human animals. And you can argue with people about, and some moral philosophers do, about the premise that human suffering is what really matters and animal suffering doesn't. So yes, it is possible for the basic criteria of our ethics and our values to change.
You talk about animal suffering. Are we as human beings being blind to the suffering we are inflicting?
I think it's interesting historically to look back at 200 or 300 years ago when slaves were not regarded as properly human, and so they were treated abominably. And it's very hard for us to put ourselves back 300 years and imagine what it was like to be so cruel, the way the slaves were transported in ships, lying row after row after row without moving. We have to wonder what we are doing today, which might in the future be looked back upon with such horror.
Do you think that in the future we will think of how we treat animals like slavery?
I suspect so, yes.
And should we grant it rights to some animals, for example?
I think it's very hard to argue against that. I think, and some of the best moral philosophers are now suggesting that any sentient being, so it would not include plants, not include creatures that have no nervous system, but pain. I'm thinking as a biologist now, if you think what pain is actually for, it doesn't require great intellect to experience pain. Pain is a biological mechanism which has evolved to prevent damage. So if an animal is wounded or does something that causes pain, you can think of it as a kind of warning, don't do that again, because next time it might kill you. Well, there's no reason to suppose you need intelligence in order to benefit from such a warning signal. In fact, you could say that the less intelligent the species is, the more pain they need in order to learn, and so they might actually have a heightened sensitivity to pain compared to us, because we are intelligent, and so we perhaps need only a small amount of pain in order to discourage us from doing something in the future that has caused pain.
You're an atheist, you're a militant atheist. Do you think that still in great part of the world, atheism is such a bad label or a bad word?
Yes, it's a bad label, especially in America. I don't know what it's like here. In America, notoriously, you can't get elected to high office if you say you're an atheist. In Britain, you can, and it's regarded as irrelevant, I think. And this is because, in America, it's because people think you can't be a good person. I mean, this extraordinary idea that you need religion in order to be a good person. I was once on an American radio show where the people phone in, and a man phoned in from Texas and said if he didn't believe in God, he'd go out and shoot his neighbor. And some people really believe that. And I would like to live in a world where people don't believe that kind of thing.
You have been a character for both The Simpsons and South Park.
Sorry?
You have been a character in The Simpsons and South Park.
I enjoyed The Simpsons. I went to their studio in California, and of course, I just did my voices. It's all cartoon, and so the actors playing Homer Simpson and Marge looked nothing like what I would imagine. I mean, I could hear Homer's voice coming from this actor, but he didn't. That was quite incongruous. And I did my little piece with just my voice, and then
South Park has not a very elegant sense of humor. That episode.
No, I mean I've only seen the one episode that somebody sent me. It's not proper satire at all, because it's not satirizing something that's real. It's just trying to be scatological.
Yeah, but there's a plot about a war between two different groups of
That's
atheists in a post-religious world. Is that a valid point, that if everybody will be atheist, will be maybe a war between which are the right atheists?
It's an interesting commentary on history, that whenever a movement starts out, it tends to schism into factions. It's beautifully satirized in Monty Python's Life of Brian, where one faction has the sandal and one faction has the gourd, and they've split into follow the gourd, follow the sandal. That's a point worth satirizing.
Finally, you have been in Chile. You have the opportunity to be in Antarctica and Punta Arenas. You see a replica of Darwin's ship, no, in Punta Arenas?
That was the high spot of our trip to the very far south of Chile, was to go and see a replica of the Beagle, and also of Magellan's ship as well, and other historically important vessels. That was wonderful. We also went to Easter Island and saw the Easter Island statues, which are amazing. It's in many ways a tragic place, but it was very interesting to go there and spend 4 days there.
Like the statues in Easter Island, and other example of people believing supernatural things and doing great...
Well, it led them to this extraordinary effort. I mean, the enormous amount of work that went into both carving the statues, transporting them, and erecting them. Only religion can do that to people. That's true.
And do you think that's a good or a bad thing?
Well, I mean, it's not good for them. I mean, they wasted their lives doing it, but it's very interesting for us.
Richard Dawkins, thank you very much for having me here.
Thank you.
Muchas gracias a ustedes por habernos acompañado en estos Encuentros del Futuro.
Como decía Richard Dawkins, sobre creencias, quizás es mejor no pensar en buenos o malos, correctos o incorrectos. Sí está claro que muchas veces para las personas es tranquilizador poder creer en algo sobrenatural o fuera de lo racional, para poder sentirse mejor consigo mismas y también con los demás. Esperando haber generado en ustedes un espacio para la reflexión desde la Facultad de Ciencias Físicas y Matemáticas de la Universidad de Chile, los dejamos invitados hasta una siguiente oportunidad.